Welcome to So Much and More to Say. My name is Nefemi, and I'm happy that you are here to listen. On this episode, I'm going to be talking about a film that had a pretty unexpected effect on me. I don't think I would have ever expected to care or be moved so much by a production that centered around Godzilla, but Godzilla Minus One was just amazing. When it comes to Godzilla movies, I think I have only seen maybe 1, 2, or 3, and I've only seen I believe it's the ones made in the English language. Godzilla Minus One is Japanese. So I'm not too familiar with Godzilla movies, but the 96 Academy Award winning Godzilla Minus One was amazing. And this review will contain some spoilers, but to give you a quick one, go and watch it. It's amazing. Godzilla Minus One, written and directed by Takashi Yamazaki, is a 2023 epic kaiju film told from the perspective of a guilt-ridden former kamikaze pilot, Koichi Shikishima, portrayed by Ryonosuke Kamiki, in a post-World War II Japan dealing with the presence of a terrifying monster, Godzilla. The story progresses at a well-crafted and steady pace, and I loved how it was told. I think enough time was given and spaced out to show Godzilla's rampages as well as the mundane and regular events. And although I think it's a given that a monster should be scary, for some reason in this film, Godzilla was just extra scary. And I think it's because the human characters were a really captivating and focal point of the film. It wasn't a film about Godzilla reigning terror, but it was a film about people who wanted to live. Koichi Shikishima was a very compelling character, and I think he was the perfect one to see the events of the film unfold. When the film begins, Shikishima has fled his duty, so he is a kamikaze pilot, and essentially what kamikaze pilots were supposed to do, from the quick research I did, was that they were supposed to intentionally fly their planes into whatever their target was, whether it's like an enemy warship or something, and essentially they were just supposed to lay down their lives. So he fled his duty by faking a malfunction with his plane, and he goes to this island with these mechanics, and there Godzilla shows up. And when he has the opportunity to shoot Godzilla, he freezes, which leads to the continued rampage of the monster, which leads to the eventual deaths of all but one mechanic on the island. Viewers see Shikishima, haunted by nightmares and guilt, steadily do what he can as the film progresses to fight against Godzilla and also help those around him, notably Noriko and Akiko, who he begrudgingly took in early on in the film when he comes back from the island. Things look really bleak for Shikishima early on, but the introduction of Noriko's character, portrayed by Minami Hamabe, and the baby girl she watches at the request of the dying mother, offers a small beacon of light in his life, and it seems like he's going to move on, but he just remains plagued by nightmares. And I think there's one part where Noriko kind of asks him what's troubling him so much, why, what is still going on with him. But essentially, he's just plagued with so much inner turmoil, and with that, although him and Noriko essentially live in the same house and care for the same child, there's he keeps a strict barrier. People ask him when are you gonna marry her? But he's like, no, I don't want that. But we know he does want that. He just doesn't feel like he should have that. Other characters that were fun to watch were Shikishima's fellow minesweepers. They all had a really fun dynamic together, and it was fun to just always see their scenes because I just loved the way the characters were with each other. And by the end of the film, viewers can find themselves really rooting for the characters who end up risking their lives to end Godzilla once and for all to make it out of the film successfully. I think Godzilla's inability to die was also something that made the monster so terrifying. Also, his heat ray, I think that's what it's called, that thing was terrifying. Whenever his back was charging up, his tails would not his tails, but those thingy things at his back that would just start sticking out. And when Godzilla blew the heat ray, and there's one part where it completely decimated a whole city, I was like, whoa, how is this thing gonna die? His stubbornness in staying alive really leaves one questioning, could this monster even be killed? Can it even perish, And And I remember when I saw its cheek regenerate, I was like, bro, there's no way this monster's like this monster's not going anywhere. I think in the end, though, they do end up killing Godzilla, but it seems as if Godzilla's going to start regenerating. And so I was like, okay, we saw one piece of Godzilla regenerating in the post-credit scenes, but does that mean the other parts of him are going to regenerate too? Because if they do, there's going to be like a million Godzillas running around, and that's not going to be fun for anybody. And honestly, speaking of the ending of the film, I was really surprised by the direction that it took. I think Shikishima himself had said that he wasn't supposed to be alive. So seeing his determination to take Godzilla down once and for all, it felt as if by the end of the film, he would lay down his life. It kind of seemed that there was this recurring motif or idea of the man who wasn't supposed to be alive was going to die. And I thought that was going to happen. And although Shikishima does bravely risk his life to bring Godzilla down, and he does fly his plane straight into the mouth of Godzilla, which then blows up, everybody, like, when the scene happens, like, everybody's looking and they're like, oh my gosh. And then they suddenly see that Shikishima ejected from the plane, and they cry like, oh my gosh, the pilot ejected. It was so surprising to see that, and it was so relieving. I had to pause the film to wipe my tears. I was so happy that man was alive. It just, oh my gosh, this film was so good. I think the visuals of Godzilla Minus One were also amazing, which goes without saying, as the Academy Award win can testify to that. But something I really wanted to point out or mention was that the color in the film looked so good. Maybe it was because of the camera used, or it was like a color grade thing, or I don't know what it was, but the colors looked so beautiful. Like, the brown wasn't just brown, it was brown. The blue wasn't just blue, it was blue. Like, the colors were so crisp, so deep, so amazing. And the film was just really, really good visually. I think something else that stood out to me with Godzilla Minus One was that at its core, it was a story about living. That's what I saw. I think mixed up in it is the fight to survive, but ultimately it seemed like every character was just fighting to live, to be free of burdens and the guilt that comes from not living up to expectations or choices that are not made. Seeing Tachibana, the sole survivor of the opening Godzilla rampage portrayed by Munetaka Aoki, extend grace and forgiveness to Shikishima was really touching to see. I think Tachibana telling him that he should live must have been really impactful for Shikishima, because Tachibana insulted and hated that man for not shooting the monster in the beginning, and I think to see the very person that hated him, the person who probably at some point did want him dead, now wanting him to live, forgiving him and giving him grace, that was so beautiful. It really touched my heart. And it was also really beautiful to hear the speech the captain gives at the end, well, not towards the end, but like when the men are preparing to fight Godzilla. I think that speech was really beautiful. And I think the speech really emphasized the theme of the desire to live. And when thinking about the message about the desire to live, I can't help but think about John 10 verse 10, where in the Holy Bible, Jesus says that he brings life and life in abundance, as opposed to the enemy who comes only to kill, steal, and destroy. I find it interesting that the human body has a survival instinct, that by default it chooses to preserve itself, that it chooses life over death. In life, humans make choices with varying consequences, and knowing that they can rise and try again and continue living is beautiful, and I think is necessary for life. I'm also reminded of the famous verse from the Bible, John 3:16, which talks about God loving the world so much that he sent his only son, Jesus, that whosoever believes in him shall have eternal life and not perish. And there's also another verse in John 17 verse 3 where it says that eternal life is knowing the one true God and his son Jesus Christ whom he sent. And then there's another verse where Jesus says that he's the way, the truth, and the life, and that no one comes to the Father except through him. I think life is so beautiful, and its beauty can be perfectly seen through knowing the one who gives it. I think life, can be really difficult, it can be hard. Jesus himself suffered a lot, but with Jesus there's always hope. And Jesus does say that anybody who's burdened and I think carrying a heavy load should come to him, that his yoke is easy and his burden is light. And I think it's Matthew 11:28. But yeah, I can testify that true life comes from knowing Jesus, that true, abundant, renewing, and joyful life is through knowing Jesus. And honestly, life is just a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful gift, and it's amazing. All in all, I give Godzilla Minus One a 4.5 out of 5. I think it was a well-written, well-directed, and well-crafted film. The characters were captivating, the story was compelling, and the music was so beautiful. Oh my gosh. Godzilla Suite 2 and 3 from the soundtrack were so good. I think the music composer's name is Naoki Sato. I'm so sorry if I probably mispronounced like almost every name in this episode. I'm so sorry. But the music composer, he did such a good job because those two songs were so good. I had to put them in my playlist. But yeah, Godzilla Minus One, absolutely amazing film. Go and watch it. I don't think you'll regret it, but yes. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you when I see you. Thank you for listening again. Goodbye.